Saints Row has always been known as a GTA clone. From its first release to its current announcement, it's always been a clone of something, never being able to find itself in the vast market of open world crime games. The old Saints Row games were GTA clones. The new Saints Row game is a Watch Dogs clone, or a Fortnite clone. Anything but an original idea. And that is the personal hell the developers of Saints Row have lived through for the last 15 years. And when you start unraveling that story, it's not hard to tell exactly why the series changed so much from its original vision. Most people would argue that Saints Row series started to go off the deep end when 3 came out, but undoubtedly, Saints Row 4 killed the franchise. People didn't like it because the game changed too much, and went from a story about gang warfare and street-level crime to a weird version of The Matrix, where you've now become the president of the United States fighting to save the planet from aliens. I believe the reason Saints Row 4 jumped the shark was because of one thing. One term the developers constantly heard no matter how much effort they put into their game.
And it plays, looks, and feels just like GTA.
Initially, the game just looks like a carbon copy of the Grand Theft Auto series.
The series actually started off as a comparatively tame Grand Theft Auto clone.
So it used to be said that the Saints Row series is a clone of Grand Theft Auto.
You ever played Saints Rows? No, I don't play posers. Imitation, highest form of flattery. No, I don't play posers.
The only chords in it are A.
I never really felt that Saints Row was a GTA clone. The original game started development a year before San Andreas even released. So at the time, Vice City just came out, a game that's very different from the gang warfare of Saints Row. And the developers never revealed this until years later on, but the Saints were actually meant to be green. Even in early trailers, you can see that the Saints are clearly green here. But after San Andreas released in 2004, the developers realized that they now have a very similar game they're working on, with a gang that looks like a cheap knockoff of Grove Street.
Was when it was called Bling Bling also the same time when the Saints still wore green?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, that's why this shirt is green.
Ah.
Yeah, I remember, because when I got hired, they had us read all the design documentation. It was right after San Andreas came out. I remember like, oh, come on, man.
Yeah, it was. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
The whole studio was, but then purple's better.
No, oh my god, no, oh my friend. Oh Jesus, you walked up to a landmine. So,
It's quite ironic to see that developers themselves predicted the wave of GTA clone comments before the series was even released. And it's only when you know this context you realize that Saints Row was never attempting to copy GTA, but games journalists didn't see it this way. Upon release, dozens of reviewers, even bigger names like IGN, was calling Saints Row a GTA clone. The developers themselves even said that they felt the original game was too similar to the Grand Theft Auto series. So how do you make your game different from GTA? In 2003, start developing a game about gang life in the hood. Oh, what's that? We're copying San Andreas? Okay, fair enough. Make the protagonist a mute in almost every mission to poke fun at GTA 3. Oh, what's that? We're ripping off GTA 3 too? Okay, fine. We'll be the first open world shooter with a functioning multiplayer mode. Still a GTA clone? Okay, let's make Saints Row 2 more over the top and more zany. We'll add demolition derbies, Fight Club, Cops the TV show, and a mini game where you spray shit all over people. And just to drive the point home, we'll add a streaking and flashing mini game too. People are still calling our game a GTA clone? Fuck it! More over the top zany gameplay!
Go with zombies, clowns, BDSM, sex dungeons.
Sir, I think that's enough. Keep pumping that fucking shit! What happened to the Saints Row series? After years of constantly being compared to a game they could never distance themselves from, they killed the franchise. Fans everywhere complained that this wasn't Saints Row. And 1 year, they managed to not only make sure that nobody would compare their games to the Grand Theft Auto series, but also to Saints Row. They alienated their entire fan base trying to shake off that stigma. And even though Saints Row 4 sold well, it hurt them in the long run. When going back and reading through old interviews with the developers, it's painfully clear that they hate being asked the same question over and over again. It seems whenever they're interviewed, the journalist always brings up Grand Theft Auto in some way. Even though at the core we share similarities to GTA, our mechanics and God knows our tone is completely different from them. I look at GTA 5 and think there's this massive game coming out, but I don't think with our superpowers and alien invasions that anyone will be comparing us to them. They're gonna affect the entire market, but for us we feel like Saints Row, since Saints Row 2 has just been, we are not GTA, we are not very similar to them. Developers clearly stated right here in these interviews that their game, they feel that Saints Row has just been, they are not GTA, and they are not similar to them. When making these games and developing them, they constantly had this idea in the back of their head: don't be like GTA, don't be a GTA clone, don't copy GTA, make yourself as different as possible to avoid that type of criticism. It's such a sad story when you think about it. No matter how successful they become, no matter how many games they sell, no matter how big they are, they're still never good enough in comparison to GTA. No matter how hard they try to be original and different, they're still labeled a GTA clone and compared to GTA. Criticism like that, whether it's true or false, really affects a person. It makes a person so insecure that everything they do is always second guessed and changed due to that insecurity. And most of the time, criticism helps someone become better. In this case, it went to their head and made everything worse somehow. You could blame game journalists and reviewers, you could blame the GTA fan base, you could blame gamers if you really wanted to. But at the end of the day, the developers and writers of Saints Row are the ones to blame. While most studios ignore the community entirely, Volition is on the opposite side of the spectrum and responds to everything. They never found that balance of listening to their core community while blocking out the bullshit. Saints Row isn't a GTA clone now. It never was. But everyone, including the developers themselves, couldn't see that. They were so caught up in trying to be different rather than sticking to their guns and listening to their player base, they ended up making everyone hate them. You can't please everyone, but when you try to, you end up pleasing nobody. And that's what I believe killed the franchise. But I gotta give it to them. After 15 years of struggling, Saints Row finally did shake off that GTA clone stigma. Nobody calls them a GTA clone anymore. They all just call them a Watch Dogs clone. After this reboot, nobody will be calling them a GTA clone anymore.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
Here's Saints Row 4. PS3, copy. I'll show you. Disc is in there, everything. But I will give this a very special place. The fucking trash can.